Hello and welcome to this Checkmate Tutoring Services lesson on creative writing. This lesson forms part of a series that will help you to write good question 5 responses in your English Language Paper 1 exam for the GCSE syllabus from AQA. This lesson in particular teaches you how to read a picture for meaning and also shows you how to use the CCTV and PAL methods to write creatively about a cinematic picture, a picture with lots going on. Please remember to download and either view in separate tabs or print out the picture resources for this lesson. The links can be found down below in the box. The exam board wants you to focus on Objective 5 and 6 for this task. Assessment Objective 5 is basically about writing creatively using structural features like paragraphs and sentences to help make your writing interesting and engaging. For Assessment Objective 6, you are tested on your ability to use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures to make your writing clear and again interesting for the reader. You're also assessed on your ability to spell both words that you can come across every day and more complicated words accurately throughout your writing. Therefore, this lesson has been designed with this in mind. This lesson's learning question is, can I produce a piece of creative writing based on a panoramic picture demonstrating my skills in addressing Assessment Objectives 5 and 6? To get us started then, spend 5 minutes looking at this picture and writing down all the things that you think are happening here. You might write a series of questions at this stage. That is fine, as hopefully by asking these questions you will have answers later on in the lesson, which will help you in your writing task. Here are some examples of things you might write. There are 3 people in the painting. One is working, one is sleeping, one looks angry. There is an animal, maybe a cat or a dog, clawing at the machine of the sleeping man. What does the writing say on the piece of paper above the sleeping man's head? It is really important that you spend the whole 5 minutes writing down as many things as you can. It doesn't matter if you really don't understand what's going on in the whole picture. Just think. You can't have answers without the questions. Okay, so the reason I got you to complete that task and the reason I reinforced the idea that you needed to spend 5 minutes doing it is because some studies show that even in art galleries, many people spend as little as 5 seconds looking at a picture before moving on to the next one. Whilst this is fine in an art gallery, you really don't get an understanding of the true meaning of a picture or other piece of artwork if you just spend 5 seconds on it before moving on to the next one. Remember, you have 55 minutes to answer this question in the exam, including planning time, and it is a 40-mark question, so you must absolutely spend more time looking at the picture you have in front of you, both in this lesson and your exam. There is a difference between hearing and listening and seeing and looking. You might have heard your parents saying, "I know you're not listening to me." They don't actually know this, they don't have superpowers, but they are making the assumption from your reactions. Maybe you're just agreeing with them or arguing back too quickly, so they assume you aren't taking on board what they're saying. The same is true with seeing and looking at something. You might see a policeman talking to someone at the side of the road as you walk past, and you might assume that that person being spoken to is being arrested, but have you actually looked to find out? The easiest way to really engage with a picture is if you imagine that you're in the scene that has been drawn, and that therefore you see the picture in 3D. You don't interact with the objects or the people in the picture, but you can see above and below and to the left and to the right. Also, at this point, it's really important to note that with art, there isn't one definitive meaning to a picture. Your interpretation is the one that's important, and for the purposes of your GCSE exam, your descriptive writing could be written from the perspective of the characters you meet in the picture. For example, in this picture, we have 3 people. 2 of these people are standing by machines which look fairly identical, and there is another man who looks angry and is carrying a stick. How do we know what kind of room this is? Well, unless you're a historian of the 18th century, you won't know for certain. But everybody has studied some British history since they've been at school, and everybody has some common sense. So if we combine our knowledge and common sense, we can work out what this room isn't and what the machines might be used for. Even though it's an old drawing, does this look like a living room or a lounge? No, there's no furniture in it, and you wouldn't have machines like this in a lounge. Now to answer our next question, relating to what the room and the machines might be used for, we need to do a bit of simple detective work. What is that next to the cat? Is it a spinning wheel? And if so, what is it used for? Why might the cat be interested in climbing up the machine in the first place? If you have a pet cat or know anything about cats, what do they love playing with that is likely to be in this room? Okay, so these questions help us decipher the picture. Firstly, you should know from history lessons that spinning wheels were used to make thread, a kind of string, from individual fibres. Cats, of course, love playing with string or pieces of thread, and given that we know that there is thread in this room, perhaps this is why the cat is climbing up the machine next to the man who is sleeping. Then, to make a logical guess as to what the room in the picture is, you can combine all of these clues. It is likely that this room is some sort of factory or workshop for making cloth. The spinning wheel is used to make thread, and the thread is then fed into these bigger machines. The cat is attracted to this place because cats love playing with string or thread. Now that we've established what this room is, we need to ask and answer some questions about the people that are there. Why is one of the men holding a stick and not doing any work? How else is this man different from the others? Why is one of the men asleep at the machine? How are these people behind the machines different? Please spend 5 minutes answering these questions. Remember, there is no absolute and correct answer, but try to make estimations based on what we already know and what we can see around the characters. Okay, so one of the problems that students face in English exams is they find it difficult to transfer the information and knowledge they have gained in the classroom to success in the exam. And question 5 of paper 1 of the English language exam is particularly difficult if you don't follow a sequence of steps to produce both a relatively long and engaging piece of writing. Remember, this is a 40-mark question, so you will be expected to dedicate about 55 minutes to writing your response in the exam, and this includes all planning and preparation time. Unfortunately, I won't be able to appear in the picture to tell you what to do, and neither will your teacher. So if you follow the steps in the CCTV method that I'm about to explain to you when creating imaginative writing from pictures, this will help to ensure that you have enough to talk about and structure your work appropriately. To use the CCTV method of creative writing successfully, you need to imagine that you are a CCTV camera operator and that the picture in front of you is like a piece of footage that you have to search for clues. You are in control of the movement and how far it zooms in and out. It is important that you do zoom in and out with your imaginary camera, as this will force you to write in lots of detail about particular aspects of the picture rather than being too brief. As you can see from the animation above my head, camera on the camera can move to the left and to the right and up and down. As well as that, he can zoom in and out, and you must do exactly the same. Your first step is to zoom the camera all the way out and look at the picture as a whole. When doing this, try to answer the 3 W questions. Where are you? What are people, animals, features doing in this picture? Why are people, animals and features doing this? Now you need to zoom in on a particular piece of the image that you think you can talk about in more detail. Obviously, don't zoom in on one piece of wall that has no distinguishing features. Try and zoom in on something that you can say something about. For example, in the picture we have just looked at, you could zoom in on either of the men that are standing in the room, or perhaps even the cat. When you have zoomed in again, answer the same questions. What is the person, animal or thing doing? And how and why are they doing it? Still imagining that you are a CCTV camera operator, you need to think that after zooming in sometimes with your camera, you'll lose focus and it will need readjusting. If you concentrate on the area you've zoomed in on, what else do you see? Here is where you can start being creative by adding reasons for the observations you make. For example, what might be the reason that someone or something is behaving or looking the way that they do? Your ideas here don't need to be directly linked to what you physically see. You can use your imagination here. All of the things that you've written so far will have formed the basis of one paragraph. Therefore, the final section of this paragraph is the concluding or linking sentence that links to the thing you're going to talk about in the next paragraph. As you zoom the camera out, you zoom in on another part of the picture and repeat the process. So, putting it all together, if you were talking about the picture we worked on at the start of the lesson, you might write something like this at this stage. The picture is of a factory of some kind. There are several large machines and 3 people in frame. There are 2 men standing behind machines, one is working and the other is sleeping. However, there is another man who looks older than the other 2 and seems particularly angry. He is likely the boss or the manager of the factory and is annoyed at the man who is sleeping, presumably when he should be working. The sleeping man looks the exact opposite of the one that is working. Even though he is asleep, his face seems somehow sinister, whereas the man who is working seems innocent, content and almost angelic. The reason for the man's slumber becomes clear when the large beer jug in the foreground of the picture is seen. It is clear that the man has been drinking. As the cat edges closer to the top of the sleeping worker's machine, the boss grows even more angry. Okay, this picture is by the same artist as the first one we looked at. It again is set in the 18th century and is entitled Southwark Fair. This picture represents a travelling fair similar to the type that still visits our towns and cities today. Except of course today there are no rides and some of the things that were popular in fairs of the time because they are considered either unethical or too dangerous. I want you to use the CCTV method again to zoom out and provide 2 or 3 sentences describing the big picture. What is the picture about? What is it depicting? I then want you to zoom in on 3 particular parts of the picture and describe these before focusing in further. Remember to zoom out using the last sentence of each paragraph to link to the next, introducing the next topic. If you're stuck regarding what 3 separate things you could discuss, here are 3 things to get you started. The first in the bottom right hand corner of this picture is a man on horseback. You might be mistaken for thinking he is some sort of policeman or security guard, but he isn't. In fact, he is a prize fighter. He travels with the fair and effectively fights for cash prizes. He would normally fight in a boxing ring in the centre of the fair. This isn't visible in this picture. And any members of the public who thought they were good at fighting, thought they could beat the prize fighter, they would volunteer to do so. The crowd would make bets on who they thought would win, and would either win or lose money depending on who they bet on, and whether that person won or lost the fight. Our fighter carries a sword, and this is because in some cases fights involved weapons. As you can imagine, these fights were unlicensed and sometimes dangerous. There wasn't a referee, and normally a win was determined by a knockout. So as a result, prize fighting was banned in the early 20th century. Moving towards the far bottom left of this picture, you'll see an activity that is far more financially dangerous than physically so. Sitting at this table, you'll see a woman and a man with a black hat standing over her. He is playing a game of dice, basically a rigged gambling game, in which the stallholder, the woman, will allow him to win a few rounds of the game, where you gamble who will have the highest score from throwing the dice, until once the man has wagered all of his money, she will win, and take all of it. These kind of confidence tricks and street gambling can be seen in most major cities still to this day, including London. However, they are illegal, and the police often arrest those that set up these types of games. Finally then, just over here you'll see two people staring into the end of what looks like either a rabbit hutch or a chicken coop on wheels. Unfortunately, this is not either of those. It is a peep show. Before the time of Photoshop, taxidermists, those people that would stuff dead and wild animals, would make them look alive again. They would often create mythological creatures out of the bodies of exotic animals. For example, they might create a mermaid by sewing a fish's tail onto a monkey's body, and then pretend that what they had created was in fact a real mermaid. People would then buy a ticket to see this creature. More often than not, the viewers didn't realise that the creature was fake and believed that they were seeing a real-life mermaid or whatever weird and wonderful creature the taxidermist claimed he had created. Once again, the peep show is no longer a part of our modern fairs as people aren't so gullible, and also quite rightly, we aren't allowed to kill and stuff exotic animals. Okay, so I'm going to give you 15 minutes to complete this task. I won't be recapping what you have written, but it is important that you engage with this task as best you can, as the notes you produce will serve as part of planning for the main task later on. Okay, up until this point, the notes we've been producing could be described as descriptive and not imaginative. In many respects, we have just listed what we can see in the two pictures we've looked at. This is helpful to an extent as it gives you a starting point from which to produce your creative writing. But if you handed that work in to your teacher now, or even worse, submitted that as your exam response to question 5, you would score low marks, as A, this is not what the question is asking you to do, and B, it isn't long enough or in any way imaginative. So whilst of course there does have to be an element of description in your writing, you also need to mix some imaginative features into your work. Remember, the exam board states that for AO5, you must communicate imaginatively, selecting and adapting tone, style and register. So if you handed in what you have already written, you would only have achieved the first part of this sentence. You would have communicated clearly. Also, if we look at what AO6 says, you must use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures to make your work clear, but also to create an effect. Basically, your work has got to interest the reader. So again, even if you had spelt and punctuated your work perfectly, if you haven't used vocabulary or sentence structures to make your work interesting, you really are going to score low marks. So in the next part of this lesson, I'm going to introduce you to another technique you could use to turn your descriptive notes into an imaginative piece of writing. Okay, so we have now looked at the CCTV method of creative writing. We are going to investigate how we use the pile method to do the same. Pile stands for prepositions, words ending in ing, words ending in ly, and finally words ending in ed. The pile method of writing was designed to help prevent students from writing really repetitive sentences and therefore really boring work. Often when creative writing tasks were given to students, they would score very badly because they would write in first person, past tense, or every single sentence would have something to do with the senses. For example, they would write something like this: I'm at a fair, all I can see is people. All I can smell is candy floss. All I hear is people shouting. So to avoid this, if you start each of your paragraphs with either a prepositional phrase, an ing, ly or ed word, you'll be prevented from writing in this boring manner and won't be able to write in the first person past tense. This means that you will write in present continuous tense. Take yourself out of the action and don't run the risk of writing a story, which is absolutely what you shouldn't do. If we look at the example sentence for the prepositional phrase, above their heads, a tightrope walker frantically clings to life. This is far more interesting than if you wrote the same thing in first person. I can see a man above my head, he is a tightrope walker and looks like he's going to fall off. Then looking at the ing word example describing the crowds, instead of writing the crowds are really noisy and some of them are singing. By using the sentence opener, bustling, we are already hitting the AO6 criteria for using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for effect, and it makes your writing far more engaging. Bustling crowds shout and push, shove and sing. Moving on to the ly word example. Instead of just saying the place fills up with people really quickly, by using the sentence rapidly people arrive from everywhere, again the same thing is said but in a far more interesting way. Finally, opening a sentence with the ed word famished to describe the children in the crowd enables the reader to use their imagination to think what the children are doing in the crowd and what they look like. By using this sentence, I haven't described the clothes the children wear or how they look, but the reader can automatically imagine that they might look a bit like Oliver Twist and Fagin's gang of urchins that steal for survival. Famished children work the crowds of inebriated revellers, stealing a coin here and watch there. Obviously, don't overuse this technique. Don't spend all your time ensuring that every other sentence starts with a pile technique, but do consciously think you shouldn't be writing in first person. Try to open your paragraphs with pile technique. Do use the CCTV method throughout your writing, and if you see that as you read through your work you are using the same sentence opener, stop and change it. Okay, as you can see, I've created a model paragraph that has been developed using the CCTV and pile methods. I'm not going to read it out to you as you can pause the video and look at it at your leisure, but you will notice that I've highlighted the use of a prepositional phrase and an ly word. I haven't gone crazy with using every element of pile in one paragraph, as that can make the writing seem boring too. However, I would expect over the course of 5 or so paragraphs that you would have used all of the elements of pile by the time you got to the end. Remember that the zoom out section of the paragraph is your linking sentence, so this should briefly introduce what you're going to discuss in the next paragraph you create. I'm now going to leave this paragraph on the screen for the next 2 minutes to give you a chance to read through it before moving on to the next writing task. Okay, for the next 45 minutes, write a piece of creative writing based around the picture using this question. Write a description of the scene shown in this picture. You only need 45 minutes instead of the usual 55 because we have already carried out much of the planning and preparation work needed earlier in this lesson. Remember the importance of using both the CCTV and pile methods of writing you've been taught, and spend time thinking about your sentence openers and vocabulary. Don't write in first person at all, pile replaces this. Okay, thank you for participating in this lesson. I hope you found it useful. If you're subscribed to the Checkmate tutoring platform, you can of course submit a draft of this work and a teacher will give you some feedback on it. In any case, we will go through a sample answer in the next session. Until the next session, take care. Bye. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this lesson today, or if you would like to subscribe, click the bell icon and then you'll be notified of any further uploads. Thanks very much.